What's up, everybody? Welcome to Move the Sticks. DJ and Buck with you. Buck, man, it feels like we were just together a couple hours ago.
Because we were. We were just together.
A little Super Bowl half and post there at NFL Network, and now we're back in our homes as we kind of digest everything that we saw. We talked about it a lot last night, but were there any other takeaways top of mind as you got home and kind of took that whole thing in?
Well, based on me talking to my team today working out, I missed a really good halftime performance with Bad Bunny. I didn't know because I didn't see any highlights. Yeah. They were really excited about it. I know the young people were really excited about it or whatever, but missing that part of it. I would say with the game itself, DJ, I think it was just another reminder of how hard it is to win that game and how in most instances, in pretty much every instance that I can remember since being in the business, man, the best team typically wins. It is rare that the more talented team that gets to that point doesn't win the game. And I know I made the case for the Patriots because when I kept looking at this game, I kept reminiscing to 2001 when the Rams were the greatest show on turf and they were able to knock them off. But every time we talked and every time we did any kind of list where we're ranking individual players, position groups or whatever, it was decidedly in the Seahawks' favor. And as you outlined before the game, we talked about like the only way that they lose this game is if they mess it up. Like they don't have to do much to win it. They can win it on points. They have knockout power, but they don't have to play a risky game to win it. And what we saw play out is they were very conservative and close to the vest until they got a crack. And when they needed to deliver the knockout, they did, but they didn't play out of pocket. And the Patriots just had no answer for the overwhelming talent and tactics that the Seattle Seahawks presented.
Yeah, I felt like Seattle was a better team, no question. I thought they would win that game. I thought there was no way that New England would be able to block them for 4 quarters. And, when you look at these Super Bowls over the last decade, usually that's the tell. You got 4 guys that can whip 5 guys. You're going to win. It's just going to be hard to lose a ball game. And I thought, though, Seattle, from a game management strategy standpoint, they look like a team that really took in especially the Houston game with New England and took in the Denver game and said they gave them those games. Like, we are not doing that. We're not going to do it. And we're going to take threes when we get we're not going to pass up opportunities for threes because threes are like 7s in this type of a game. There are a lot of points with a limited group over there. We got a dominant defense. We're not going to give them short fields, and we're going to take points when we can get them and just keep adding them and adding them and adding them. And I thought, look, Houston turned the ball over a bunch, and Denver, they didn't take points when they had a chance to take points, and they turned the ball over like that. That's it.
That's been a big part of Mike McDonald's thing. If you look at the Seattle Seahawks, they were among the least aggressive when it came to going for it on 4th down in red zone situations. Now, part of that is when you have a defense like they have and understanding your team, I'm always going to take points because I know the other team can't really score. So there's no need for me to be risky or out of pocket when it comes to the decisions. But you are right. They probably did a deep dive on those games in the playoffs. The Patriots offense hadn't played well. Drake May in particular, as part of the group, hadn't played well. They felt like there was a certain number that the Patriots would have to get to beat them. And once they got into the game and they felt like they had them under control from a defensive standpoint, then it's about stacking enough threes until you got enough cushion to be able to really dictate the terms and forcing the Patriots to play a certain way, the way that you wanted them to play.
Yeah, I think they executed flawlessly. And there was some takeaways I wanted to take from this game because you can go to a zillion podcasts, they're going to break down the game A to Z. But I wanted to put our scouting hats on, our personnel hats on for a minute and kind of go through this Seattle team of, how this maybe informs what the offseason looks like with free agency and the draft. And it's always the case. You always look at the team that won the whole thing. You look at the final 4 teams, but then you also look at the team that's left standing at the end. So I jotted down a couple things that I think if you're building out a team that would this would look attractive to you if you just watched that game last night. So here, I'll give you mine, Buck, and tell me if you think of any others. But and you saw Mike McDonald say after the game, look, when we can stop the run with 2 high shells, it's going to be tough. So I'm looking at that going, okay, well, DTs that can play the run, and they've got them. They've got 4 of them that they roll through there, but especially their 2 stars, Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, both they can rush the quarterback. You need to do that. But they earn the pass rush opportunities because they're dominant DTs against the run. And I start thinking, okay, now as we're stacking some of these guys, and over the last few years, maybe the last decade, I know I've done it. There's guys, DTs, that I've pushed down a little bit because we say, hey, he's stout and he's strong, but he's not giving us enough pass rush. So let's slide him down the board a little bit. I think that type of player, that profile, when you can play that type of defense and put a lid on everything and allow no explosive plays, that affords you that luxury. I think those DTs that are strong run defenders never been more valuable.
Yeah, never been more valuable. And I think they have to have enough versatility. In that quote Mike McDonald talked about, how hard it is to put guys in situations where they have to occupy multiple gaps. Mm-hmm. We have been in a league that has been a one-gap league, meaning we wanted defenders that could occupy their gap. We wanted defensive linemen that could get up the field, control their gap. And as many have said, like, hey, I'm going to stop the run on the way to the quarterback. Mm-hmm. The Seattle Seahawks don't operate like that necessarily. They have some two-gap situations. They do some things differently. They're bigger. They're stouter. And I'm going to say this, having watched them up close and personal against the Jaguars when they came down to Duval and played in the bank, the one thing that I remember that was notable about their defensive line: big, fast, and physical. You feel the Seattle Seahawks when you play them. You can feel their physicality. You can feel their toughness. Some of why they're able to play so fast is because there's some simplicity to what they do defensively. But in terms of the traits and the talent, they are a heavyweight team when they walk off the bus.
Well, that's going to get me to my next point, because the next thing I wrote was start with DTs that can play the run and then depth at the edge, having guys you can roll through there. And if you think about it, you get DeMarcus Lawrence out there, who's a physical, heavy-handed rusher. Chenna can do. Chenna's got juice, but Chenna can play a little bit both ways on that deal. But then when you have Boye Mafe and Derek Hall, those guys are like 4-5 guys. So not only do you keep your guys fresh through games, like rolling those edge guys through, you keep you fresh through the season, you keep you fresh through the postseason. Like those guys, that was not a tired group. That was a group that looked like they finished the marathon and we're like, what was that? Is 26.2? That's it? Like we could do this. We could do another 10 miles here. We're fresh as can be.
Yeah, and we talked about it. We talked about it on the show last night in post game, how the last 2 years in the playoffs and in the Super Bowl, we saw the teams that had the deep and talented defensive lines have their way in the game. Philadelphia Eagles 2 years ago, the Seattle Seahawks this year. And it's something that we used to view as a luxury. Now it may be a necessity. 7-8 guys that can play, and having a coaching staff and a defensive coordinator that's unafraid to play a bunch of different guys. Yesteryear was, hey, we're going to keep my starting group on the field. They're going to play all these snaps. We're going to wear them down or whatever. Now it's not. We're rolling bodies in and out. Like it's almost like hockey. We're rolling guys in as a line change, and we're just going to keep wearing you down with bodies. And unfortunately, for the offensive line, you don't get the opportunity to do that. You don't get a chance to sub out or whatever. And so I'm bringing these fastballs and fastballs and fastballs at you. At some point, you're going to wilt under the barrage of pressure, the harassment, the persistence, all of it. It's just part of a well-executed strategy to meld your personnel with the way that you want to play.
Let me go back to that Eagles team you just brought up. So if you go back last year, that Eagles team, Buck, did not have a double-digit sack artist. You had Josh Sweat with 8. Nolan Smith had 6.5. Milton Williams had 5. Jalen Carter, 4.5. Brandon Graham, 3.5. Zach Bond, 3.5. Nakobe Dean, 3. So it was more about depth than it was, having that one guy or, somebody that's out there getting 15, 16 sacks. This team, which was the stat that shocked me with Seattle, is they didn't have anybody with double-digit sacks on this team either. And you watch them and you're like, man, they suffocate everybody. But when you pull up the individual stats during the regular season, pulling up right now, I think it was 7. They had on the defensive line, you had, again, Nwosu 7, Leonard Williams 7, Byron Murphy 7, DeMarcus Lawrence 6, Drake Thomas with 3.5, Jaron Reed 2.5, Even Wari 2.5. Like it's not the ace pitcher. It's the collection of the pitching staff, and they got a bunch of them, and that's something we've seen now 2 years in a row. And I don't know that. Does that mean, okay, we need to load up with all first round picks? But I don't know about that. But it might mean like, hey, if we can trade back, if we get a bunch of like second, third round picks, like maybe instead of taking that guy at 10 or at 15, like let's try and get 2 or 3 of them like littered throughout the first 3 rounds, because that they all come from the first 3 rounds, but maybe waiting a little bit for that day 2.
Yeah, the collective, and we've talked about this in various terms. I think it's interesting because as we're doing the deep dive on where these guys are coming from and how the defensive lines that are most successful, you invest your picks in the first 3 rounds. You can get your offensive linemen sometimes in various spots later, get your running backs later. But if you're going to have a top defensive line, you better invest early. So you talked about Andy Reid and how Andy Reid loved to get a big every year. Offensive line, defensive line, they're going to commit one of their first 3 round picks to someone that's in the trenches. Well, with the defensive line, if you're going to have that, we're not going to get a defensive lineman when we need him. We're going to get him because that's just part of what we do. You cannot be a line of scrimmage team if you don't invest in the line of scrimmage. And these teams that we're talking about, Mike Macdonald, defensive-minded coach, you talk about Andy, you talk about Philly and the way they did it with Vic Fangio. You have to commit to what you want to be good at. Like, that's just what it is. And you can't blink at that. The depth and the accumulation of having a dominant line matters.
And think about also with those 2 groups, you have the heavy hand, like Brandon Graham would probably be more like the DeMarcus Lawrence, like strong, firm power guys. But then you've got Nolan Smith, coming off the edge, who's an absolute fastball. So they've got a mixture of guys. It's not just that, we want all these guys to look exactly the same. So if you're a team that's got some power rushers, man, you need to get a fastball to supplement those power rushers and vice versa.
So what it sounds like is we've talked about the wide receiver room being one where you're building a basketball team.
That's great.
Where you have complementary. Now on your defensive line, you need a little bit of everything. Hey, I need a plugger to stop the run. Oh, I need a quick guy to be my 3 technique. Oh, I need a power rusher on one side and a speed guy. And whatever I have, I need duplicates because I want to roll them out. And it expands your drafting profile because think about all those years. You'd be like, man, he's a really good player, but he's not for us because we don't play a scheme where we can use it. It appears that Mike Macdonald has enough freedom and flexibility with his scheme to be able to take different type people. And I'll say this, I think it's also not a diversity in terms of playing style. How about a diversity in age and experience? Veteran in DeMarcus Lawrence, veteran in Leonard Williams. Both those guys have played 10 plus years. Byron Murphy, year 2. Jan Reed quietly has played almost 10 years in this league. But then you got other people. So bringing all of that together is not just about youth and experience. It's having a mix of everything to make it work.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me how this has been out there for teams now. And so to the fans that are reading mock drafts, by the way, this should be a little nugget for you. Oh, we already have 2 pass rushers. Why are we taking another pass rusher? I want this. We don't have a linebacker. We don't have a running back. We don't have you don't ever have enough. Like, that's the whole thing. Take great players, and if they happen to be along the defensive line, even better. I want 8 of them.
So there's a thing, and I'm going to say this, I'm going to reference Ron Wolf a ton because these come from when I worked in Seattle under John Snyder. They always talked about you can never have enough great players. And they learned from Al Davis that you build strength on strength. So many people think, oh, well, we already have that, so we're good. Let's go get – but some people are like, well, yeah, it's great. There's a really good player here that's a position of strength for us. Let's get more of it. Let's be even more dominant. I've heard you talk about – if you're rebuilding the team, what side can I get to being great first instead of being average at both sides? There is something to that. And I'll cap it by saying Willie Shaw was my defensive coordinator in Oakland. He's David Shaw's dad. And he always would say this, if you play to your strengths, you have no weaknesses. And I think when you operate in that mindset, like how can we make ourselves dominant where our superpowers overwhelm people, it gives you a chance to win if you can always get the game on your terms.
All right, Buck, we touched on this. We don't need to spend a long time on it, but we've been talking about this for a while now. But just having the complete tight end, like we're seeing the ability to be able to block in the run game and then also to be a functional pass catcher. Like they've done that with their tight ends in Seattle. And look, Arroyo they took, who's got big time speed and has got a chance to be a real playmaker, but you're not playing that much because these other tight ends are so good at the point of attack and are functional in the passing game. Barner especially did a nice job. So having a complete tight end, man, that sets you up big time.
Okay, last night we talked about positionless ball and how the game is being overrun with hybrids. Well, to me, the tight end is the original hybrid in football because he's part offensive tackle, part wide receiver. And when you get a guy that is a true wide, they do offer you that. And when you have guys that can really block, it really creates what I call an unbalanced line because even though they have eligible numbers, they're in 80s, they're really extensions of the offensive line, and you can control the edges. So much of what Kenneth Walker was able to do was because on the edges, the tight ends were able to dominate and create soft spots where you can get around the corner. And when you're bouncing and you're running duo and popping all the way outside and you're cutting your zone back, that's because your tight ends are winning the edge game. They're dominating at the point of attack. And their blocking, to me, mattered far more than their receiving, even though the complementary action between their run game and their passing game allowed them to do some subtle things to create big play opportunities like the touchdown to A.J. Barner. All of it fits together, which is why we've raved about the system that Kubiak and Shanahan and all those were. I mean, there are no tails. It is all stacked upon each other. But when you have dominant tight ends, like those teams we talk about do, it makes it so much easier. And guess what, DJ? There's some really good tight ends in this class that are coming up.
No doubt. There's some really solid tight ends. I'm excited about this class, a bunch of them. Two other things I'll just kind of lump these next three things together. Tackling in the secondary, which we've been harping on for a long time. It's hard to be a great defense if your little guys don't tackle. And I mean little guys, I'm not talking size-wise, but just your corners, your safeties. Like they are an outstanding tackling team. Incredibly smart team. And listen to some of the post-game stuff. They talked about that in that defense, how smart, you got to be to play over there. It's a smart group. And then I just wrote down, in terms of ball security and managing the game, kind of lumping those together of understanding what does each game require from us? And I think give Sam Darnold a lot of credit for that, give Kubiak a lot of credit for that. But understanding on the offensive side of the ball, okay, this is what this game's going to require. They feel you out. Okay, we kind of feel out, they can't do much against us. Okay, this is how we're going to proceed going forward. I think that kind of goes in together with the intelligence, the smarts, and then the tackling thing. I kind of clump those three things together.
Yeah, I would say this, and I would say like so much of sometimes frustration from the media standpoint comes from the way that we view the quarterback and the way that we evaluate the quarterback in the media in terms of when he plays well and when he doesn't. So much about playing the position is about managing the game. And I know when we lump that out there and we talk about this guy being a game manager, it is always viewed in a negative connotation because we've romanticized the position where we want him to be John Wayne and the superhero and to do all these things, where really the great quarterbacks are able to assess the game just like coaches. Hey, man, they can't score on us. It's no need for me to do it. We've talked about Tiger Woods on Sunday. I'm up by 3 shots. Oh, yeah, you didn't get nothing but the irons. 3 iron off the tee. I'm not giving you a shot to be back. Oh, hey, this is a little more competitive. I'm going to have to hit the driver. I'm going to have to go for it. I'm going to have to go for the pin and do those things. Great quarterbacks not only have the talent to do that, but they have the mentality to be able to understand what is required on that given day. To me, that is underrated, not discussed enough when we talk about quarterback and excellent quarterback play.
And, this goes back. We've been having this discussion here for 10 years. On Sam and on the quarterback position, because we've said that the playoffs, the regular season is about your floor, and people get celebrated because of your floor and the consistency, 17 games. To have success in the postseason, you have to have it's about the ceiling. And people say, okay, well, gosh, in 2 of these games, you didn't have to do anything, right? The first playoff game against San Francisco didn't have to do anything. This Super Bowl, quite honestly, didn't have to do much, but the ceiling was needed against the Rams. And if Sam Darnold didn't have that level of talent and that level of ability, we don't need him to do it. We don't need him to do that 16 times. We don't need to do it 5 times. We needed to do it twice against the Rams. Forget the first one against the Rams, but we needed him to ball out in that game at home and then check after a couple turnovers and turned it on big time. And then we needed him in the playoff game against the Rams to be able to go toe-to-toe with Matthew Stafford, which he did. So the ceiling, and that's why when you're like, okay, well, this guy's going to be a consistent, good, solid player. I'm like, yeah, but there's a reason why Joe Flacco has a Super Bowl. It's not because he was the most consistent guy in the world. It's because when he needed to, he could elevate to go play at that level for 4 games.
It's so funny, right? Because I use this analogy, and we use this analogy when Sam was coming out, and I used a basketball description between the difference between a shooter and a scorer. And a shooter is the one that we talk about at quarterback. That's, man, it's pretty, it's pristine. The footwork, the mechanics are nice. They do all those things. But the scorer, it may not be pretty, but they find a way to get buckets. And as we're describing Sam, man, the turnovers were all over the place, led the league in giveaways with 20, all of these things. But in the playoffs, he manages that. But in the game where they needed him to go and get a bucket, he went and got buckets against the Rams. And the great scorers know how to insert themselves into the game based on that. Where a shooter, it has to be pretty and pristine. Sam Darnold is not always going to be pretty, but look, you can't dispute the results. He scores. And because he scored, particularly the last 2 years, the way he's operated as a scorer, his teams have been super successful. I think, 29, 14 wins in each of those seasons. I mean, that's what it is. And I know people hate the quarterback win stat, but in the meeting rooms, DJ, when we're talking about quarterbacks, we talk about their ability to win games. And this has been, this playoff run has been a microcosm of what is needed to win.
Yeah, it goes back to, I was thinking about that Rams game, the Thursday night game where there were some struggles early. And I was thinking of that, that Penn State Rose Bowl and that the way they came back in that game and he made all those big throws and they end up winning that Rose Bowl game there and against Saquon Barkley and Penn State and that crew. Sam's kind of always had that ability. If you need to get there, he has the tools to do it. Now, in the end of the year last year, they were overmatched along the offensive line. It wasn't a fair fight. They got destroyed up front in those two games, and he didn't play well. But when they've given him a fighting chance, and he's been able to elevate in those big moments. So hats off to Sam Darnold. Last point I want to hit on this, Buck, and this is a ode to your buddy John Schneider. You better be willing to trade talent, and you better be willing to take on the risk to trade for talent. So to me, I think there's so many times like, we can't trade this guy. This guy's kind of, Russell Wilson might get a statue outside of our building. Like, we can't, nope, whoop, gone. Geno Smith's actually played pretty decent for us. Like, you know what? Yeah, but for where he is right now, where we need to be, it's not good enough. So we're going to move on from him. DK Metcalf, talented as all get out, but it's just not the right fit for our group right now. So we're willing to move on there. But then on the other side of it, hey, we've got a chance to go, get Leonard Williams. Boom, let's do it. Ernest Jones, go make a trade for him. Come on in. We've seen it with Rashid Shaheed was a huge part of their team, was a move that they've made. You've got to be willing to do both. You can't just sit there and say, we've got our group, we're going to run it back. And, they're kind of established and entrenched here. You got to be willing to do that. And I think that's a good sign. So many of these teams they sit on their hands, man. You can't do that.
No, you can't do that. I think there are a few things to discuss when it comes to those trades and why you move off of players or why you acquire players. One, you move off of anybody who doesn't fit the description of what you describe your team is. So if you talk about these guys have to have these core traits to be Seahawks, and I'm not talking about physical, but I'm talking about the emotional, the mental, the way that they blend in with the team. They have to have those things. MOB, mission over BS. When you do that, you're fine with it because you're going to have a collective, a group that plays together. The other part of it, you have to have an ownership group that buys into the vision, and they don't necessarily keep score of your hits and misses. One of the reasons why John Snyder is able to do that, because look, they had some misses. It hasn't been perfect with them early on, man. When they were getting Charlie Whitehurst and Matt Flynn and all those guys, they overpaid. It didn't work out. They were able to stick to it. Came back. They get the Marshawn Lynch's. They come back and get the recent guys that you talk about, whether it's acquiring Leonard Williams, whether it's going for Rashid Shaheed. All those players that they went for is because ownership allows you to go do that. And they don't necessarily hold you. Oh, you made this one mistake. We're out. You have to be willing to live with some mistakes if you're going to operate in that world. And the Seattle Seahawks have been willing to live with some of those mistakes, and that's why they've been able to come to the other side. Final point when it comes to John, listening to him, we heard him post-game when he talked to Mike Robb and MJD, and he talked about every day thinking about how can we look at our team and how can we make it better? What aggressive, bold moves can we do to always chase that ideal team that we want? It's about being fearless. You can't worry about it. You got to sit in some muck sometimes when it doesn't go your way. But you have to continue to take your shot if you're trying to be on the championship team.
Yeah, you can't be scared, just kind of boil it all down to that. You just can't be scared. I want to give you, 5 players that if we're looking at this draft as we kind of spin this thing forward, as we're trying to do on this episode here, 5 players I think teams might be looking for. This is a good notebook for you, Buck. I give you 3 notebooks a year.
You gotta give me ideas.
One idea. This is I probably owe you 2. I don't think I've given you another idea the whole year. So here's a notebook idea. 5 players on the Seahawks that teams will try and identify in this year's draft. The 5 players I wrote down. Okay. It's a good notebook idea, right?
Yes, that's good.
I've got JSN. We've got Leonard Williams.
Good luck.
I've got Walker.
Yeah.
I've got Eamon Wari.
And
I've got Rashid Shaheed in terms of the role that he has. So I'm going to just give you quick 5 names here that I just wrote down that I think you could make a case for in these roles. And obviously, we're not saying that these guys are as good as them, but they can use them in that fashion. I think Mekhi Lemon for JSN as someone who I think can play inside and outside, but who is so strong to and through the ball, is fearless, tough, is, got some polish to him. I think that's a fit there. Leonard Williams, look, Leonard Williams was my number 1 overall player in his draft class. And Caleb Banks is not, he's not in one of my top 25 players.
Monster.
He's not in my top 25 players, but Buck, he's got that frame. He is 6'6". He's 330 pounds. He has that type of upside and ability. Leonard was way further along at this point in there, and coming out of college, coming out of USC. Yeah. But that's the guy that fits that bill of someone that you can dream on him, and it's going to end up pushing him way up in this draft, I believe. Eamon Wari, I'll get to him. McNeil Warren, the safety from Toledo, who's 6'3.5", 218 pounds, and he can run and can make a lot of plays. He kind of fits that big safety who could drop down there and do some things. And I wrote Concepcion as the Casey Concepcion as the Shaheed factor with the big time speed. Not the biggest guy in the world, but can really, really go. Could help you in the return game. And then I went to you on Walker because I was having a hard time on Walker. And I think we kind of chopped it up a little bit. And Singleton is someone who at least has that speed. I know he's hurt coming off this injury at the Senior Bowl from Penn State, but someone who can press and bounce and has that big time home run speed.
Yeah, so I like that. So I'm gonna one up you. Like, I think Nicholas Singleton certainly has that ability. I'm gonna say Emmett Johnson also has that. When you look at him on tape, he can do it. He's a better pass catcher coming out of the backfield. I agree with you on Caleb Banks. Man, I love 2024. You look at his tape. He can get after it. He is active. He has all those things. Your comparison, Mekhi Lemon on JSN. I have another one. When I look at Jordan Tyson, to me, he has some of that ability. In fact, I wrote JSN in my notes in terms of him as a route runner. The safety positions, you're on it when it comes to that. And Casey Concepcion, I wrote down in my notes, and it's funny you talk about I wrote down Parker Washington. And the reason why
there you go. Yeah.
I wrote down Parker Washington in my notes is because the return ability, working over the middle, what you can do in terms of being tough, all that other stuff, the explosiveness, same thing. Concepcion going from State to Texas A&M, being able to make plays, that's what it is. And that's the fun part. Every evaluator, and it's tough right now because they're in the middle of these things, but every evaluator takes time. They look at the Super Bowl, they study the trends, the teams that continue to exist in the postseason. And I'm going to say this, DJ, because they're so stunning visually. When you're on the field with the Seattle Seahawks, you look at them and it reminds me, not that they're at the level of dominance, but it reminds me when you go to the college games and when Alabama was in their heyday with Nick Saban, you would see them run out and you see the other team. And you see one team's not like the other. And there is something about trying to fit that profile and going back to Snyder and going back to all those people that grew up in the system. Man, it was about the traits, the tools, the size, the length, and why you put these standards and dimensions physically on people, because you want a team that looks the part. And we felt what that team looks like. And that's not discrediting the Patriots, because I actually thought the Patriots played pretty well defensively.
Yeah. Oh, they played great. Yeah.
Just offensively, they were overwhelmed by a talented team. And a few weeks ago, I did a study between the Dark Side and the Legion of Boom. And DJ, I couldn't give it to the Dark Side because they hadn't won it. But everything that I checked off, far more talented unit than the Legion of Boom that dominated in those 2010s.
So many guys, but I think there are some similarities too, though, in terms of trying to throw numbers at you up front and beat you with that. Having a fastball, Cliff Averill, I believe, was on that team, if I'm not mistaken.
Cliff Averill, Michael Bennett.
Yeah.
They had Mumbles, Brandon Mebane.
Yep.
All those Red Bryant was on it. I mean, they had some guys had linebackers that I would say their linebackers were better. But the back end, you can make the argument as talented as the Legion of Boom was, Richard Sherman and Cam and Earl or whatever. They're not as versatile as these guys. Devin Witherspoon, it was like a showcase game for him. Like, oh, I can go to side, I can blitz, I can do all this stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Buck, see, I mean, that's a quality notebook item.
I mean, that is a quality item. And here's what I know. My main editor, Gennaro, at least he's going to listen. He always listens to the podcast. And I know I'm going to get a note probably on Wednesday like, hey, man, you were kind of talking about this on the podcast. Like, this might be like, you might put this in as one of the sections.
Yeah. And if there's anybody else, like if there's any other, I mean, you can see who's the Byron Murphy, like you find some of the other key guys. I mean, Witherspoon would be a great one, in terms of who plays like him. I've got a lot of corners. That's one of the positions I haven't done a ton of them yet. So I got a lot more work to do on the corners. Like I'm curious to see some of these smaller guys, Pons from Indiana, watch him, see what he looks like. How does he, I mean, I don't think he's going to be on that level, but excited to study him and get into it. I'm cranking. I'm done with D lineman, Buck, for the combine. I'm done with quarterbacks. By the end of the day, I'll be done with wideouts. So we're checking through these guys, man. We're working.
So you're funny because you like to always start like with the bigs and then work through the skills later. You got to catch me running. I'm gonna start with the skills, get excited, and then I'm gonna be like, okay, I got to dig into the bigs, the offensive linemen. So can I
tell you why real quick? You know why? Because I believe in the like the flywheel, right? Like just kind of get the
momentum.
Going. Get it started, get momentum. So, I like watching the bigs because I can just watch the end zone cut. So for those, if you've never watched all 22 film, you get the sideline view. So you can see it from the side to see all 22 guys. And then you get behind the play or in front of the play, but the end zone camera, which if you're watching an offense or defensive lineman, I don't need the wide. I can just give me the end zone cut. So I cut that out. So I feel like I've cut my time almost in half and I'm just jamming. I mean, you can roll through these O linemen and D linemen. So it helps me get some momentum. I'm like, man, look at all I got accomplished today. And then lo and behold, I say at the end, I got corners and I got to watch both cuts and it takes forever.
But I try and create the momentum, the flywheel effect differently because if I start jamming, I start liking some of these skill guys. I'm like, oh man, I know I said I was going to do. I know I said I was going to do 6, but man, I might be able to get to 10 today. And so
I'm doing lineups now. I don't need as much coffee. As much coffee. When you're doing offensive lineman, sometimes as a quarterback, I need a little extra coffee.
I was going through the centers, so I did it like tackles, then guards, then centers. Hey, I needed a few. Kind of get through it. Yeah, it was
caffeinated. You gotta do what you got to do, buddy. Hey, it was great seeing you last night, man. We're heading towards our time of the year, as we like to say. So if you're all about free agency, the draft, we've got you covered on Move the Sticks. We also doing my project with Rosie. 40s and free agents is out there. Where he's got his free agency list coming, which I'll rip apart, but we'll we can have fun on that guy as well. So, all right, Buck. Anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
No, man, so fun. Congratulations to the Seahawks. Congratulations to Snyder and the crew. Congratulations to Mike McDonald. That coaching staff, the job that Clint Kubiak did while managing his new role and responsibility that'll be announced shortly. Amazing.
Very cool.
Again. Yeah.
Very cool. And again, why I love doing this show with Buck. We've been doing it for a decade plus. Is Bucky's got background with John Schneider, known him for forever, and he knows that world. And I'm kind of like loosely connected to the Ravens kind of way that they operate with McDonald kind of coming in there. So you do this thing long enough, you kind of see these merges and these families kind of come together, and it doesn't get much better than what we saw from the Seattle Seahawks, Buck.
No, it's been great, man. Congratulations to them. Confetti flies. But you know what? It's a new day. Cast your eyes to 2026, 27.
It's wide
LA.
open.
LA is right back. Everybody has a chance.
We'll be right across the street for that one. All right. Thank you guys for checking us out. We'll see you next time right here on Move the Sticks.